Servant, Episode 9, Jericho. I'm Joe. Please subscribe to this channel. Finally, we get an answer to one of the big questions, which was what really happened to Jericho. Probably not my favorite episode of the season. Be tough for this to be anybody's favorite because it's a pretty depressing subject matter, but set up some interesting things as it always does. Before I go into what happened to the episode, again, cinematography on this show is just beautiful. The truck shots from the side, including getting the shot towards the end of her in the tub with the baby. Great acting, especially by Lauren Ambrose in this episode. It goes back to the childbirth of Jericho. They had a home birth in a bath, like a tub, and immediately after the birth, they saved the placenta, and we see the placenta later in the episode, still in the fridge. And the second thing is great acting from Lauren Ambrose, because there's a shot of her in the bed holding the baby, and she does just a really good job with her facials of showing that trying to smile, but she's not smiling. She's depressed. She is clearly in a state of postpartum depression. She does a great job with just that one shot. As we learned earlier in the show, they kept trying to have babies and they kept, being rejected. They kept being, she kept having miscarriages, a number of miscarriages it looked like. So it took them, it was tough for them to have this baby. So she'd be a good case for somebody who would end up with postpartum depression just because of the amount of effort they put into this and the amount of babies that didn't make it until they finally had one. And which leads to part of Sean's guilt, I'm sure, because he leaves. You see her going through the days, you see her trying to cope, and as that's happening, he leaves to go off and do one of those cooking reality shows in Los Angeles where he's a judge, which is kind of funny because now we kind of know the basis of his character, which is that what would it be like to see the home life of one of those rude, mean judges on a reality TV show. And he's as vicious as you think he would be, as you see some of his clips saying like, I wouldn't feed this to my dog, you're a disgrace. But maybe he feels like he's in the shadow of his wife a little bit, which were things kind of hinted at earlier in the season. And now we see his time to shine. And his time to shine when he got to be on TV himself, when he got to reverse roles with his wife. And what that led to was the ultimate abandoning of his family in that time of crisis when he should have clearly seen she was depressed. He went off to be a star on his own and to have his moment. And even though he acted all miserable throughout the whole experience, he went out and did it. So he sort of did use this as his moment to shine over his wife. It ultimately cost him. She pulls into the spot. She takes all the bags. She goes into the house. She doesn't close the door. So that's supposed to indicate that to you that she was just taking all the bags in and then she was going to go right back out and get the baby. That's, I guess, the premise behind why she didn't close the door. And then as time goes along, the wind closes the door. And it seems like she just goes the rest of the day without even knowing the baby's not there. She's even in the room putting a fan and the baby's not there. Till finally at night, she listens to the monitor, hears nothing, looks at the baby crib, horrified, and then cuts to the car alarm going off, and we go into the present. Great transitions. So great direction, great editing, great transition to from back in the day to the present. And in the present, Leanne is not pleased after she's learned the news. And yeah, it is awful what happened, and it was clearly neglect, but at the same time, she was sick. She clearly was sick. In a way, it doesn't make Leanne this avenging angel. Leanne wakes up Dorothy. She's sitting at her bed because the car alarm's off, and Dorothy's got her period again, and Leanne makes a comment about how, oh, you're fertile again. Soon Jericho will have a sister. Almost like kind of nudging at her, knowing she's not going to want to have another baby after all the trauma they went through. Then she makes her breakfast. Brings her up to breakfast. Dorothy's gonna do a thing in a swimsuit for the news of reopening a pool. And Leanne first says, I think you look great. And everybody knows you just had a baby a few weeks ago. They're going to be expecting you to carry a little weight. Has a conversation with Sean. Sean says it wasn't a crime. The police said this happens 40 times a year. She runs into the car, Dorothy, to go because she wants to get a new swimsuit. And there's fish in the car, and Dorothy friggin' projectile vomits all over the car. Which then leads Sean to thinking Dorothy was poisoned by Leanne, because he wraps up whatever's left of the breakfast that Leanne made for Dorothy, puts it in the fridge next to the placenta. I guess maybe he wants to test it later to see if she was poisoned. Car alarm goes off again. And this time we see Dorothy scrambling all over the house for the keys because it's bah, 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 and the baby's crying. Scrambling all over the house for the keys. Finally finds the keys, it's not working. It's not working, so she goes outside. She keeps getting closer and closer to try to get the alarm to go off, and it's just not working. Even to the point where she opens the door. So it's not even locked. And it's not working. Even she's touching it. You see that Leanne's up in the room with an operating lock, turning it off and on, messing with Dorothy. And probably messing with Dorothy's livelihood as well, as she's doing this looking like a crazy woman. You briefly see a guy walking by doing this. Later in the episode, we see that the report that Dorothy was supposed to do was done by Isabella, the intern, the one that they mentioned earlier in the season and then briefly mentioned in episode 8's recap video at the beginning. They didn't really touch on Isabella too much, but we saw Isabella in her place and we saw Dorothy acting crazy and somebody filming it. She's going to be ridiculed because of this. And they already have somebody as a potential replacement who's younger. So this is all going to come back up later. Brilliant the way they transition between the two. We go back to Dorothy going and getting Jericho, the real Jericho, out of the car after she left it in there all day. And she was going along with life as if the baby was not dead. But the baby was dead by that point. There's no way it was alive. It wasn't crying. She's even holding it as they come in and start putting the crib together and start getting the baby's room ready. She is reading through applications of potential nannies, and we saw her doing it early in the episode, and we saw some people who weren't Leanne, and she sees the application from Leanne. This calls it the serious question, the idea that somehow Leanne knew about the baby being dead already and brought her own baby because she figured she could step right into its place. Great direction, great writing, everything about this episode. I mean, as far as how it looked was fantastic. The baby monitor starts going and you hear a baby crying and Dorothy's like, oh, and she goes upstairs and then you start hearing that the baby monitor is just picking up another baby monitor from another mother with the baby who's still alive. And that's what Dorothy looks down and sees, finally realizes, even though she was probably just in denial, that the baby's dead, and starts shaking and goes catatonic. Glance of the stone cold, pale, dead baby. We really didn't need to see much more. We didn't need a train spotting incident. Dorothy is holding the baby as it's crying, the baby that's now in the house, back in the present time, and Leanne comes in and takes the baby away from Dorothy and says, I'll take it, you're sick. You have to do what's right for the baby. I always do what's right for the baby. And then Leanne walks over and closes a door, the old, closing the door on Kay from Godfather type shot, where Leanne's now closing the baby out of Dorothy's life. Questions still need to be answered about what is this baby? Is this really Leanne's baby that she snuck in, or is this a literal reborn baby? aka reborn doll. This is a real baby that she somehow reborn. There's a placenta in the freezer, and on top of that, we saw earlier that Leanne applied for this position well before the baby was dead. This was something that she was always wanting to come there, but why? Why did her application show up right after the baby was already dead? There was a question I asked in the last video, what was that thing on the counter? It was a big piece of meat. A lot of people had said it was a big piece of ham, a big piece of pork. It was so hot that it came in raw and cold, and it almost looked cooked by just the heat because I don't have any AC, but it just looked rotten towards the end. So we learned that. In the comments, I had noticed a lot of people were giving their ideas of what they thought happened to the baby. And there were people who said, oh, Dorothy cooked it. Would that be something? Because he was always saying, stay away from the kitchen. Or Dorothy put it in the washing machine because you kept seeing him go down to the washing machine and that was the theme. Well, even though I'm sure the people who said, or the people on there on Reddit who thought the theory was the baby was cooked, probably meant that somehow she put it in the oven, she literally did cook the baby. She did cook the baby. It's not a laughing matter. You leave a living thing inside of a car and it's 110 degrees and there's no windows opened, the car becomes an oven. And God knows how hot it was in there. And that was essentially cooking the baby's insides. Awful. But not coincidental that a show that takes place around food and takes place around the chef, that the baby died by essentially being cooked. If it wasn't clear enough for you what happened to the baby, Leanne said, you know, why she doesn't like the blowfish. She said it tastes like bruised fruit. It tastes like an apple that was left out too long in the sun. So, I mean, if you hadn't figured out what happened to the baby by the visuals, you could have figured it out by that line. So in Sean's head, now that Leanne knows, he wants to try to convince her to stay. But what is Leanne? We don't know yet. This show has done a good job of throwing you through a loop because we've thought there were supernatural things about Leanne. We've seen the things coming back to life. But then the last episode, it looked like she was playing a prank on Julian, and we saw Wendy leaving the apartment. Maybe Wendy took Jericho, the Jericho out of the house to make Julia think it wasn't there. But then we come to this and see that she sent the application in thinking she was really going there to babysit. Saw earlier that she was a fan of Dorothy, that she idolized Dorothy because of that news piece and how she was in the Honey Boo Boo Ball and met Dorothy then. And she was probably a fan of Dorothy. And maybe she somehow found out about Dorothy putting this out there, this call for help. Because she said she put it out on social media. But now the baby's back to life when she gets there. And there isn't a baby, there's just a reborn doll. So there's a lot of questions that need to be answered as to what is Leanne. And they've sent us so many mixed signals as to her being a con artist or her being a devil, an angel. We don't know, and that's the one thing we still need to find out. Write your comments down below. Tell me what you think Leanne is, because that's the last question we have, and hopefully we get an answer before this season wraps. One more episode to go, so please write your comments below. Tell me what you think she is. I want to hear your theories on this, because I have no clue. Fantastic cinematography, fantastic direction. This was the M. Night directed this episode. Great acting by Lauren Ambrose. Great acting by everybody. I can't wait for the 10th episode. I am not even guessing what Leanne is because I don't want to guess. I just want to be surprised. I just want to learn what Leanne is, what her motivations are. Do you even think we're going to get an answer in the last episode? Please write your comments below on what you think. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe to our channel. Episode 10 is next week. We're going to have a review up for that as soon as possible once it's aired. I'm Joe. Until next time.